Hi, Rob Smythe. Last night I listened to a 2008 debate between Christopher Hitchens and Frank Turek on the existence of God. I'll post the YouTube link at the end of this presentation. Christopher Hitchens, of course, is dead, which is sad because he was such an eloquent speaker. I loved listening to his discussions. And I enjoyed the lively exchanges between the two intelligent people in the YouTube debate. After the presentation, the moderator allowed each one to question the other. Hitchens actually preferred to let the audience throw the questions, but Turek had one that he repeated many times because Hitchens appeared to miss the point or dodge the question. I say appeared because a response was made, but not recognized by Turek, and not by me either at the time. Certainly, Turek and some people who posted to the website thought Hitchens was missing the point. Turek kept repeating the question. The question was, since you, Christopher, are a materialist, explain to me how carbon atoms and benzene molecules can bring about the notions of truth, love, empathy, and justice. You can't. Those concepts require a higher entity to instill them in us, a judge of what is moral. That's Turek's position. Repeatedly, Hitchens took issue, he took offense really, with the notion that religious people feel they have to subjugate and enslave themselves to a deity who tells them that they're wicked and needs to be cleansed, and who demands obedience and worship and so on. It's humiliating to feel that humans aren't capable of coming up with an appreciation of doing the right thing without God having to demand it on penalty of eternal torture or human sacrifice. That's Christopher's position. Turek kept firing the carbon atoms and benzene molecules, but to no avail. Hitchens wouldn't bite, except to say that it's up to Turek to establish the insufficiency of the materialist position, but this was lost in the exchange. I'd like to respond. Turek's basic point is that God is the source of all goodness, and presumably Satan the source of all that isn't good, so knowledge of good and bad has to be imposed from above. He went so far as to say that the existence of mathematics, information, and the DNA molecule requires a deity. His point is that a bunch of carbon atoms and benzene molecules can't, without divine help, generate sensations of empathy. If he'd asked me how they could, there are two answers I could give. One is, I don't know. The problem with that answer, unfortunately, is that deists jump on it triumphantly and say, right, only God can do it. The response is nonsense, of course. The existence of God doesn't depend on whether I'm clever. The existence of God doesn't depend on how far along we are in our scientific knowledge. Going deeper, we could say that the deist's answer was just as inadequate. The deist could have said, Gazort does it, or Shebang does it, or Satan does it, for that matter. When the deist says, well, you don't know the answer, but I do, it was God, the deist isn't advancing towards knowledge, he's just putting a name to the cause of the phenomenon. A problem with the I don't know in a debate is that you always get sidetracked to explain that I don't know doesn't weaken the intellectual position of the person admitting it. Hitchens did respond a couple of times that had Turek asked the question a couple of thousand years ago, he wouldn't have been using the terms molecule and DNA. Turek became exasperated, saying, in effect, so what? Just answer the question. The second answer I could give to how the accumulation of atoms that composes us instills in us ethics and morality appears at first to reverse the issue. An atheist could say, evidently the laws of chemistry and physics do allow for it, and even if you deists don't know how, that doesn't shake my satisfaction that notions of morality are innate to humans, and to primates and possibly other organisms too. An atheist shouldn't say this in debate because it's really putting the I don't know in a deist's mouth and taking unfair advantage. That's the same thing I said shouldn't happen in reverse. Right? So let's take this a little further, but examine something simpler. Consider the action of moving your finger. You think, I'm going to move my finger, and then you move it. How does a thought trigger the actual physical action? Now, this is a deep mystery. A scientist could say, well, when I think, some electrochemical exchange happens in my brain, and that sends an electrical signal down the nerves, and that stimulates the muscle, and my finger moves. But the mystery still exists. How did the desire to move the finger cause the initial electrochemical exchange? We could get into an infinite regress here, but there's no reason to insist that God is in the details. Consider the Big Bang, which Turek mentioned often. How did the universe start from nothing? The deist always asks. We could respond, well, not from nothing, some mass was there. Or, well, not from nothing, some energy was there. Or, well, negative mass energy went one way and positive mass energy went the other way, so it still adds up to zero. But we always have the what started it issue. How did the initial mass, the initial energy, the initial impetus to change things get there? Infinite regress. There will always be an infinite regress. That does not mean there's a deity. So back to Turek's question. How do we humans have concepts of right and wrong? Evolution could help in that discussion. We could propose that organisms without such an understanding did not, in the long run, survive. Natural selection among sentient beings could select for cooperation, for adherence to, or at least contemplation of, the golden rule. I'm interested in the question. Recent studies with apes, monkeys, dogs, cats, cows suggest that non-human animals have concepts of morality. Whose side of the debate does that help? The deists would just say, evidently, God gave them morality too. Case closed. Are molecules and the laws of physics and chemistry sufficient for the appearance of morals in people? Evidently, yes, Hitchens says. I agree. By the way, Hitchens did point out quite eloquently that theists have another problem. Even if one were to accept that they were an entity to get things started, there's no way for theists to link that to the conclusion that this same entity interacts with us daily, hears our thoughts when we're asleep or awake, judges our thoughts and actions, demands that we worship it, or cares whether we win the football game. I recommend you're listening to the debate. It's entertaining and intellectually stimulating. Here's the YouTube address.